SSUSH3, American Revolution Project. I'm Carter.
And I'm Lucas.
Thesis. The American Revolution was caused by tension over taxes, limits of expansion due to war, and a strong belief that the people's rights were being violated. This picture to the right is a riot against buying British goods due to them being taxed heavily.
Topic A. The French and Indian War was a major cause of the Revolutionary War. And the explanation is, during the French and Indian War, the colonists fought alongside the British, but the outcome of the war strained the British and colonial relationship. This war helped make the desire for freedom in the colonies much greater, especially after the tight control they were put under by the British. The colonists also felt that their contributions to the war were major, and they felt they had been treated unfairly after the results of the war.
Topic A. Strained relationships. During the French and Indian War, the colonists decided to fight alongside the British and had their relationship weakened throughout the war. One of the major reasons for this was that the colonists did not get any of the spoils of war, while Great Britain thrived off the spoils that they got. This war made Great Britain one of the strongest European countries and gave them complete control over the colonies, as well as upsetting the colonists substantially. The British then proceeded to make the colonists pay off all the debt gained in their war and gave the British a huge amount of money through taxes.
Topic A. Desire for independence. After the war ended, the colonists' desire for independence grew greatly after contributing heavily in the French and Indian War. The taxes placed on the colonists only fueled their desire for independence, and it became only a matter of time until they went to war for freedom. The colonists also believed that their contributions to war were massive and that they deserved their independence after helping the British, the eventual winners of the war, fight against the French and Native Americans. A growing population also helped increase the desire for independence because with more people, they felt they had a right to make decisions on their own.
Topic A. Contributions to the war. Throughout and after the war, the colonists believed that they played a massive part in helping the British win the war, and it really damaged the relationships between the colonists and Great Britain. During the war, the colonists lost a significant amount of people during the war, and the only way that they were able to be repaid was by them being owned by Great Britain, which sparked a desire for freedom. The colonists felt as if Great Britain was disrespecting them by not giving them freedom and believed that they would have to go to war against them to get their independence. This was one of the major factors that helped persuade all the colonists to go to war against Great Britain.
Topic B. The unfair acts placed on the colonists by the British helped fuel the desire of independence and helped cause the American Revolution. The Stamp Act of 1765 placed a tax on newspaper printed in the colonies, upsetting the colonists, and was a huge role in causing the American Revolution. The Sugar Act in 1765 put a tax on sugar imports, making the colonists even more outraged and prepared to go to war. The Tea Act of 1773 placed a tax on tea, pushing the colonists to their absolute limit. The Sons of Liberty were then created to protest the law and convince the colonists to fight. After a couple of years, the Intolerable Acts were put into place as punishment for the Boston Tea Party, and this pushed the colonists over the edge.
Topic B. Stamp Act. The Stamp Act of 1765 was the first tax placed directly on the American colonists by the British government. This act imposed all tax on paper documents in the colonies. This means newspaper, letters, any form of communication by paper was taxed heavily by the British government. The British stated that the high tax was due to the fact that they had just gotten out of the 7 Years' War and were in debt. Whatever the reasoning Britain had for imposing such high taxes on papers in the colonists were infuriated and began to state that this act was unconstitutional. The people began to get violent with the stamp collectors so that they would resign. These actions were heating up the fire that is the Revolutionary War.
Topic B. Sugar Act. On the date of April 5th, 1764, Parliament passed the Sugar Act. This Sugar Act required colonial merchants to pay a tax for each gallon that was purchased. This act infuriated the merchants, traders, and colonists alike, so they began using a new strategy. The colonists started buying from the French West Indies due to their product being cheaper than that of the British. This began to hurt the British economy, so the British halved the taxes to regain trust of their customers. But what the colonists soon found out is the British Navy was heavier around the coast. This was to put a higher tax on any good that was not bought from the British. This includes wines, coffee, lumber, and iron. While the British lowered the tax of their own goods, they increased the tax of other countries' goods, which then in turn caused outrages within the colonists, making them because their basic needs could not be met.
Topic B, Tea Act. The Tea Act of 1773 was another one of the laws imposed on the colonists by the British due to their hefty debt. The Tea Act was another tactic by the British just to crawl their way out of the debt. The act stated that the East India Company, an ally of the British, could openly import and sell tea in the colonies. This was an agreement with only the British and the East India Company. The colonists were enraged by this because they agreed to no trades with the East India Company, so a plan was set in motion. This plan was called the Boston Tea Party. The plan was for the colonists to board the East Indian ships at night and dump their tea and goods that were to be unwillingly sold to the colonists over the ship deck.
Topic B, Sons of Liberty. The Sons of Liberty was a secret, well-organized political organization that had only one goal: to cripple the British rule over the colonies. The Sons of Liberty were the masterminds pulling the strings behind the start of the American Revolution. They were influential in organizing and carrying out the Boston Tea Party from the shadows. These men fueled the fire that was the American Revolution. In other words, they did not start the hatred of the British, but they encouraged action against the hatred.
Topic C. Thomas Paine helped the rise of independence by publishing articles and convincing the colonists that the only way to do it was through war. In 1776, Thomas Paine created a newspaper called Common Sense, which helped convince the colonists to go to war. The article talked about how they were being treated unfairly and that it was a good idea to go to war against Great Britain. The article also talked about how they were being treated completely unfair by the King of England and how they should retaliate and fight for freedom.
Topic C, Common Sense. The Common Sense newspaper was created in 1776 and was one of the major factors in convincing the colonists to go to war against Great Britain. The newspaper was really popular for the colonists because it gave them an explanation on how they were being exploited after already wanting freedom for a long period of time. The newspaper also convinced people who didn't think it was a good idea to go to war because it showed how something needed to change in the colonies. It also gained popularity because of the amount of people wanting freedom and how the newspaper got widespread throughout the colonies, convincing them to join together against the British.
Topic C. Treated unfairly. The Common Sense newspaper explained how they were being treated completely unfair and that it would make sense to go to war against the British. The newspaper talked about how the colonists were getting almost no benefits from the British and how they were doing a lot of the dirty work for Great Britain by paying back the majority of the war taxes. It also went into detail about how the only way to gain freedom was to go to war against the British, even though they were the complete underdogs. The colonists also realized that with independence, they would not have to help and listen to Great Britain anymore, that they would get to become their own country.
Topic C, King of England. After the French and Indian War, the British took over the colonies, and the King of England made them repay all of the debt that they had spent during the war through taxes. The King of England disrespected the colonists and made them incredibly angry through all the taxes and unfair acts that were put into place against them. The King of England constantly put more unfair taxes and showed absolutely no respect to the colonists, making the want for independence even higher. After a certain amount of unfair acts were put into place, the Common Sense newspaper came out and showed all of the colonists how they were being disrespected and used, and it enraged the colonists. The colonists got to a point where they couldn't take it anymore, and they decided to go to war against the British, which is known as the American Revolution.
In conclusion, the harsh British rule in the colonies fueled the fire that is known as the American Revolution.
Alright, guys.
Thank you. I'm Carter.
I'm Lucas.
Alright, Mr. Stilson. I'll see you tomorrow.